Imagine yourself waking up in the dim gray light of a northern dawn. The room is quiet, but not silent. You can hear the soft breathing of others, the distant bleat of sheep beyond the walls, and the low crackle of embers in the hearth. The air smells of wood smoke, wood, and earth, and the cold is already beginning to creep in through the thick wooden walls of the longhouse. This is your home, a long rectangular building with low ceilings and thick beams shared by your family, your animals, and whatever warmth you've managed to trap through the night. The floor is dirt, padded in places with straw. The beds, if they can be called that, are little more than piles of hay or furs. There's no privacy, no space to stretch, and no silence that isn't filled by breath, snoring, or the rustle of bodies turning over in sleep. In a Viking settlement, the longhouse is the heart of life. Built with timber and turf, reinforced with stone where needed, these homes are built to endure the elements, wind, snow, and slow rot of rain, but even so, they are not warm. The fire in the hearth is never allowed to go out. It's the center of the room, the center of the day. Around it, you eat, work, talk, and rest. There is no chimney, just a hole in the roof for the smoke to escape. Slowly, thickly. Your eyes sting often. Your clothes smell of ash. But the fire is life. Outside, the world is harsh but familiar. Your day begins early before the sun fully rises, especially in the long, slow winters. You tend to animals, sheep, goats, maybe a pig or two. You repair nets, mend fences, or split wood. If it's spring or summer, you're in the field with simple tools, turning over soil that freezes hard in winter and floods in autumn. Food is never taken for granted. You eat what the seasons allow. Smoked fish, dried meat, porridge made from barley or oats, sometimes cheese, if the animals are doing well, sometimes nothing more than broth and stale bread. And always, the thought of the next winter looms. Bathing is rare, though cleaner than you might expect. Vikings valued hygiene more than some of their European contemporaries. Combs were common, made of bone or antler. Baths, when possible, were taken in streams or heated water, but lice was still a fact of life. You learn to live with itching, to share your clothes and your pests. The community is small, maybe just a few dozen people, children, elders, and everyone in between. Roles are clearly defined, but flexible when they need to be. Women tend the home, spin wool, brew, ale, and manage stores. Men fish, hunt, and build, but both suffer the cold, both struggle through illness, and both bury their dead. The seasons define the rhythm of your life. Spring is for planting, summer for gathering and repair, autumn is slaughter season, preserving meat for the cold months ahead. Winter is a long, dark test of patience. The nights are endless, the fire burns low, and stories become the only warmth that doesn't burn wood. You hear tales of gods, giants, and distant lands, tales that mix history and fantasy, fear and comfort. Odin walks among men, Thor defends the skies, and somewhere across the sea, wealth waits in foreign towns if you're bold enough to leave. But most people don't leave. Most stay, most live and die within walking distance of where they were born. You are more likely to tend sheep than raid England, more likely to mend your neighbor's roof than sail to Byzantium. Still, the stories persist. They drift like smoke through the rafters. They give shape to the long days, and they remind you that life, though quiet, is not without meaning. As the day ends, the hearth is fed again. Shadows stretch along the timber walls. You eat in silence, or with murmured conversation. Children curl up beside the fire. The wind moans outside, pressing against the roof like a memory. And you lie back, pull the wool over your chest, and listen. The settlement sleeps, but history breathes. As the fire crackles low and the wind slips quietly along the roof beams. Let us now turn to the story of a man whose name lingers somewhere between history and legend. A man known as Ragnar Lothbrok. You may have heard of him, perhaps in whispered sagas or modern television dramas. He is the Viking warrior who conquered kingdoms, fought dragons, and defied kings. But the truth, if truth can be found, is quieter. It is misted over, like a fjord at dawn, not gone. The story of Ragnar begins not with a single birth, but with many voices, all speaking slightly different versions. Some say he was a Danish king, others place him in Norway, still others suggest he was never one man at all, but a composer to stitch together memory of multiple Viking leaders whose deeds echoed far enough to earn mythic weight. What most versions agree on is this: Ragnar was bold, he was curious, he was restless. He was said to have worn trousers of fur soaked in pitch to protect himself from dragon fire, thus earning the name Lothbrok or Hairy Brit. Of course, the dragon he supposedly slew was likely a serpent, or perhaps just a difficult enemy, magnified by generations of retelling. Still, imagine the image. A lone warrior in smoking armor, walking into the unknown. But Ragnar's most enduring legacy comes from the raids. He is credited with leading assaults on the coasts of England and France. There are tales of him sailing up the Seine, laying siege to Paris in the early 800s. In truth, many Viking leaders made similar voyages, but Ragnar's name, for whatever reason, floated to the top. His greatest tale, however, is not of a raid, but of a fall. According to one of the more enduring versions, Ragnar eventually fell into the hands of King Lau of Northumbria. Captured, mocked, and sentenced to death, Ragnar was supposedly thrown into a pit of snakes. There, calm and defiant, he is said to have uttered the famous line, "How the little piglets would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffers," a final warning to his sons, many of whom would go on to become powerful in their own right. But again, this tale may not be real. It may have been crafted to justify vengeance. For what followed was indeed one of the most devastating Viking incursions in Anglo-Saxon history. The great heathen army, led by men said to be his son Ziva the Bone, beyond Ironside, and others descended upon England. In 865 CE they came not merely to raid, but to conquer, and they did. So, who was Ragnar? Was he real? Historians debate this. There are no contemporary records of his life. The accounts we have come from sagas written down centuries after the events they claim to describe. Yet the consistency of his presence across oral traditions suggests that someone perhaps did live a life grand enough to inspire such enduring stories. What remains is not clarity, but atmosphere. Imagine a storyteller in a Viking hall, perhaps during the endless winter months, leaning close to the fire and whispering of Ragnar's adventures. Children wide-eyed, elders nodding in recognition, even if they too aren't sure what parts were true. Because in the Viking world, stories mattered just as much as facts, often more. Whether real or not, Ragnar Lothbrok became a symbol of bravery, of defiance, of cleverness in the face of doom. His tale, however, it may have unfolded offered a template for those who came after, a model to aspire to, a name to invoke when courage was needed. And so his legacy persists, in sagas, in stone carvings, in the rhythm of oars hitting water, not as a man, but as a whisper. And now, as we drift gently from the world of myth and memory, let us leave Ragnar to rest in whatever quiet corner of history he truly belongs to, and journey forward into something more tangible, something carved not from legend, but from earth and wood and the silence of the grave, an ancient ship of burial, and a glimpse into what the Vikings believed came next. Imagine a still morning. The mist hangs low over the Norwegian hills. The earth is damp, dark, and freshly turned. A small group of figures stands silently at the edge of a large burial mound, and beneath the soil rests a ship. Not just any ship, but a magnificent longship, nearly 70 feet from end to end, its prow curling upward like the horn of an ancient beast. This is the Oseberg ship, buried sometime in the early 9th century, and it is one of the most extraordinary archaeological finds in all of Viking history. Discovered in 1904 near the Aslafjord, the Oseberg ship was remarkably well preserved, hidden in clay and turf for over 1,000 years. And what lay within was more than just timber. It was a message, a quiet declaration of how the Norse people honored their dead and what they believed might lie beyond. The ship was a burial vessel, its deck transformed into a tomb. 2 women were interred inside, their bodies wrapped in fine fabrics. One, likely elderly, bore signs of high status. The other, younger, remains more mysterious. Their identities are still debated. Priestesses, perhaps queens, or simply women of spiritual or political importance. Around them were treasures, carefully arranged, intricately carved wooden sledges, a 4-wheeled cart, kitchen utensils, tapestries, and animal bones. Horses too sacrificed and placed beside the ship, their purpose unknown but deeply symbolic. Even simple tools and buckets were included, as if to prepare the women for chores. In another realm, these weren't mere possessions, they were provisions for the journey ahead. In Norse belief, death was not an end, but a passage. The soul traveled, and the means of travel, the ship was sacred, whether destined for Valhalla, the hall of the slain, or the meadow ruled by the goddess Freya, or perhaps hell, the quiet realm of the dead. The journey mattered. Viking cosmology was vast and layered. 9 worlds, connected by the great tree Yggdrasil of gods who walked among mortals, and different ends for different people. Warriors hoped for Valhalla, where they would feast and fight until farmers and everyday folk might go to hell, not as punishment, but simply elsewhere. A dim, cold place, quiet, like a shadow of life. And for the elite, those with status or spiritual knowledge, death required ceremony, grandeur, a send-off worthy of memory. The Oseberg burial shows this in detail. The ship itself is carved with intertwining animal patterns, each curve telling stories. Now, the wooden cart is adorned with strange, elegant creatures. The sledges, unused in summer, suggest a yearning for winter journeys, perhaps across snow-covered lands of the afterlife. But there is a silence here, too. When the burial was uncovered, Looters had already come centuries earlier. Many of the grave goods were disturbed or taken. The skulls of the women were missing, lost to decay or theft. What remains is fragmented. Beautiful, yes, but incomplete. And yet, that, too, tells a story. Viking burials were not preserved for us. They were meant to vanish, swallowed by time, absorbed into the earth. The fact that this one didn't is a quiet accident. A sliver of time kept intact. A moment frozen beneath the soil. So, imagine again. You were one of the mourners at the Oseberg burial. The ritual has ended. The grave is being sealed. The ship, once bright in the sunlight, is slowly disappearing beneath layers of turf. You place one final item, a carved amulet, perhaps on a mound, before turning away. The wind shifts, the crows call, and you walk back to the village, leaving behind the ship and the dead. And the questions, what happens after? Where do we go? Do the dead sail across unseen seas? Or do they rest in the soil? The Vikings didn't always agree, but they honored the journey. And now, as we leave the burial mound behind, we'll shift our gaze one last time from the mystery of the afterlife to the lives of those who wielded power in the here and now. From mourners to rulers, imagine the smell of roasted meat drifting through a wide wooden hall. Smoke from the hearth coils gently in the air, softened by the scent of pine and damp wool. You hear the muted hum of conversation and the slow, rhythmic clink of goblets on carved tables. This is not the world of the common villager. This is the world of the jarl noble, a regional chieftain, a man or woman of influence and responsibility. And life here, while more comfortable, carries its own burdens. The longhouse of a jarl is larger, grander, and better kept than those of the villagers. Its walls are often painted with colored dyes. The beams are carved with intricate shields hang along the sides, not just for defense, but as emblems of lineage and pride. But despite the grandeur, the jarl's life is not one of idle luxury. It is a life of constant vigilance, of quiet calculations behind every nod and feast. The jarl must keep the loyalty of the people through gifts, wise judgment, and generous hospitality. Feasting is not just pleasure, it is diplomacy, a way to reinforce bonds between families, neighboring leaders, and even distant traders. Imagine yourself at one of these feasts. You sit low to the firelight, surrounded by warriors, farmers, craftspeople. If a jarl is perceived as stingy, cruel, or weak, whispers begin. Those whispers can grow into challenges, feuds, even exile. So, the jarl walks a fine line, strong, but not boastful, wealthy, but not arrogant, decisive, but not reckless. Their duties extend beyond the hall. They must resolve disputes among villagers over land, marriage, or trade. They must manage alliances with other clans, and when conflict arises, they must lead. But leadership doesn't always mean battle. Often it means negotiation, reading a room, making subtle decisions, knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. There are moments of solitude, too. In quiet hours, a jarl might retreat to a smaller chamber wrapped in a fur cloak, staring into the embers, considering the next winter, the next marriage alliance, the next raid. Their wealth is measured not only in silver or livestock, but in people, in loyalty, in the trust of those who look to them for guidance. And when the time comes, even a jarl must prepare for death. Some are buried in ships, like the Oseberg women, others in stone cairns or beneath carved markers, their memory preserved in sagas, or quietly forgotten in the mist of time. But for now, the hall is full, the fire is warm, the cups are full, and the jarl watches it all. Bound by the same fate as all others, but for now, sitting just a little higher above the earth.